Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
All right, so we can start here. You can start reading text 7.
Karpanya dosho pahata swabhava. Dikshami tvam dharma samudhacheta. Yachuchreyah syan nishchitam bruhi tanme. Shishyaste ham shadhi mam tvam prapannam. Now I am confused about my duty and have lost all composure because of miserly weakness. I am asking you to tell me for certain what is best for me. Now I am your disciple and a soul surrendered unto you. Please instruct me. Purport. By nature's own way, the complete system of material activities is a source of perplexity for everyone. In every step there is perplexity, and therefore it behooves one to approach a bona fide spiritual master who can give one proper guidance for executing the purpose of life. All Vedic literatures advise us to approach a bona fide spiritual master to get free from the perplexities of life which happen without our desire. They are like a forest fire that somehow blazes without being set by anyone. Similarly, the world situation is such that perplexities of life automatically appear without our wanting such confusion. No one wants fire, and yet it takes place, and we become perplexed. The Vedic wisdom therefore advises that in order to solve the perplexities of life and to understand the science of the solution, one must approach a spiritual master who is in the disciplic succession. A person with a bona fide spiritual master is supposed to know everything. One should not therefore remain in material perplexities, but should approach a spiritual master. This is the purport of this verse. Who is the man in material perplexities? It is he who does not understand the problems of life. In the Brahad Aranyaka Upanishad 3.8.10, the perplexed man is described as follows. Yo va etad aksharam gargi avidit vasmal lokat praiti sa kripanna. He is a miserly man who does not solve the problems of life as a human and who thus quits this world like the cats and dogs without understanding the science of self-realization. This human form of life is the most valuable asset for the living entity. Who can utilize it for solving the problems of life? Therefore, one who does not utilize this opportunity properly is a miser. On the other hand, there is the Brahman, or he who is intelligent enough to utilize this body to solve all the problems of life. Ya etad aksharam gargi vidit svasamal lokat praiti sa brahmana. The Kripannas, or miserly persons, waste their time in being overly affectionate for family, society, country, etc. in the material conception of life. One is often attached to family life, namely to wife, children, and other members on the basis of skin disease. The Kripanna thinks that he is able to protect his family members from death, or the Kripanna thinks that his family or society can save him from the verge of death. Such family attachment can be found even in the lower animals who take care of children also. Being intelligent, Arjun could understand that his affection for family members and his wish to protect them from death were the causes of his perplexities. Although he could understand that his duty to fight was awaiting him, still on account of miserly weakness, he could not discharge the duties. He is therefore asking Lord Krishna, the supreme spiritual master, to make a definite solution. He offers himself to Krishna as a disciple. He wants to stop friendly talks. Talks between the master and the disciple are serious, and now Arjun wants to talk very seriously before the recognized spiritual master. Krishna is therefore the original spiritual master of the science of Bhagavad Gita, and Arjun is the first disciple for understanding the Gita. How Arjun understands the Bhagavad Gita is stated in the Gita itself, and yet foolish mundane scholars explain that one need not submit to Krishna as a person, but to the unborn within Krishna. There is no difference between Krishna's within and without, and one who has no sense of this understanding is the greatest fool in trying to understand Bhagavad Gita. Text 8. Nahi prapashyami mama panudyad yachuchokham uchoshanam indriyanam avapya bhumav asapatnam riddham rajyam suranam api chadhipatyam. I can find no means to drive away this grief which is drying up my senses. I will not be able to dispel it, even if I win a prosperous, unrivaled kingdom on earth with sovereignty like the demigods in heaven. Purport. Although Arjun was putting forward so many arguments based on knowledge of the principles of religion and moral codes, it appears that he was unable to solve his real problem without the help of the spiritual master Lord Shri Krishna. He could understand that his so-called knowledge was useless in driving away his problems, which were driving up or which were drying up his whole existence, and it was impossible for him to solve such perplexities without the help of a spiritual master like Lord Krishna. Academic knowledge, scholarship, high position, etc., are all useless in solving the problems of life. Help can be given only by a spiritual master like Krishna. Therefore, the conclusion is that a spiritual master who is 100% Krishna conscious is the bona fide spiritual master, for he can solve the problems of life. Lord Chaitanya said that one who is a master in the science of Krishna consciousness, regardless of his social position, is the real spiritual master. किबा विप्र किबा न्यासी शूद्र के नया यही कृष्ण तत्ववेता से guru haya. It does not matter whether a person is a vipra, learned scholar in Vedic wisdom, or is born in a lower family, or is in the renounced order of life. If he is a master in the science of Krishna, he is the perfect and bona fide spiritual master. Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya 8:128. So without being a master in the science of Krishna consciousness, no one is a bona fide spiritual master. It is also said in the Vedic literature, Sat karma nipunno vipro mantra tantra visharada avaishnavo gurur nasyad vaishnava shva pacho guru. A scholarly Brahman, expert in all subjects of Vedic knowledge, is unfit to become a spiritual master without being a Vaishnava or expert in the science of Krishna consciousness. But a person born in a family of lower caste can become a spiritual master if he is a Vaishnava or Krishna conscious. Padma Puran. The problems of material existence, birth, old age, disease, and death cannot be counteracted by the accumulation of wealth and economic development. In many parts of the world, there are states which are replete with all facilities of life, which are full of wealth and economically developed. Yet the problems of material existence are still present. They are seeking peace in different ways, but they can achieve real happiness only if they consult Krishna or the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, which constitute the science of Krishna, through the bona fide representative of Krishna, the man in Krishna consciousness. If economic development and material comforts could drive away one's lamentations for family, social, national, or international inabilities, then Arjun would not have said that even an unrivaled kingdom on earth or supremacy like that of the demigods in the heavenly planets would be unable to drive away his lamentations. He sought therefore refuge in Krishna consciousness, and that is the right path for peace and harmony. Economic development or supremacy over the world can be finished at any moment by the cataclysm of the material nature. Even elevation into a higher planetary situation, as men are now seeking on the moon planet, can also be finished at one stroke. The Bhagavad Gita confirms this. Kishine punye martya lokam vishanti. When the results of pious activities are finished, one falls down again from the peak of happiness to the lowest status of life. Many politicians of the world have fallen down in that way. Such downfalls only constitute more causes for lamentation. Therefore, if we want to curb lamentation for good, then we have to take shelter of Krishna, as Arjun is seeking to do. So Arjun asked Krishna to solve his problem definitely, and that is the way of Krishna consciousness.
All right, Prabhu, you can hold that. Lord Prabhu, please accept my obeisances. Glories to Prabhupada. And we're at text 9 of the second chapter. You can read from there.
Anybody? Please accept my humble business. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Text number 9. Sanjaya Uvacha Evam Uktva Hirkisham Kodakesha Parantapa Nayotya Iti Govindam Utva Tushmin Babavuha Puvaha. Translation. Sanjaya said, having spoken thus, Arjuna, chastised of enemy, told Krishna, Govinda, I shall not fight, and fell silent. Purport. Dhritarashtra must have been very glad to understand that Arjuna was not going to fight and was instead leaving the battlefield for the begging profession. But Sanjaya disappointed him again in relating that Arjuna was competent to kill his enemies, Parantapa. Although Arjuna was, for the time being, overwhelmed with false grief due to family affection, he surrendered unto Krishna, the Supreme Master, as a disciple. This indicated that he would have would soon be free from false lamentation resulting from family affection and will be enlightened with perfect knowledge of self-realization or Krishna consciousness and will then surely fight. Thus, Dhritarashtra's joy will be frustrated since Arjuna will be enlightened by Krishna and will fight to the end. Text number 10. Tvam uvacha hirkikesha pahamsam eva bharata senayor obayor madhye vishidantam idam vacha. Translation. O descendants of Bharat, at that time Krishna, smiling, in the midst of both the armies, spoke the following words to the grief-stricken Arjuna. Purport. The talk was going on between intimate friends, namely Hrishikesha and the Godakasha.
Lord Prabhu,
Yes, sir.
you're getting kind of static. Can you?
Static.
Can you? 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 Can you
I don't know because I'm not moving.
And even now, it's just you just a little thing. Yeah. Are you using a headset?
Yes, I am.
Okay, make sure it's plugged in properly.
It is plugged in properly.
Okay, then maybe the connection is plugged in is not good. That's why you get the, the static. All right,
Okay.
so hold it down. Yeah, and see if that helps. Go ahead.
As friends, both of them were on the same level, but one of them voluntarily became a student of the other. Krishna was smiling because a friend had chosen to become a disciple. As Lord of all, he is always in the superior position of the master of everyone, and yet the Lord agrees to be a friend, a son or a lover for a devotee who wants him in such a role. Now when he was accepted as the master, he at once assumed the role and taught with the disciple like the master, with gravity as it is required. It appears that the talk between the master and the disciple was openly exchanged in the presence of both armies so that all were benefited. So the talks of Bhagavad Gita are not for any particular person, society, or community, but they are for the entitled, for but they are for all, and friends or enemies are equally entitled to hear them. Is that any better? Text 11. Sri Bhagavan Uvacha Asya Chen Anvasocha Stvam Bhaggan Vadanscha Bhashyase Gatasam Agatasam Cha Nano Shanti Panditaha. Translation. The same personality of Godhead say, while speaking learned words, you are mourning for what is not worthy of grief. Those who are wise lament neither for the living nor the dead. Go for it. The Lord at once took the position of the teacher and chastised the student, calling him indirectly a fool. The Lord said, you are talking like a learned man, but you do not know that one who is learning, one who knows what is body and what is soul, does not lament for any stage of the body, neither in the living nor in the dead condition. As explained in later chapters, we will declare that knowledge means to know matter and spirit and the control of both. Arjuna agreed that religious principles should be given more importance than politics and sociology, but he did not know that knowledge of matter, soul, and the Supreme is even more important than religious formalities. And because he was lacking in that knowledge, he should have posed himself as a very learned man. He did not happen to be a very learned man. He was consequently lamenting for something which was unworthy of lamentation. The body is born and is destined to be vanquished today or tomorrow. Therefore, the body is not as important as the soul. One who knows this is actually learning. And for him, there is no cause of lamentation, regardless of the condition of the material body. Text 12. Na tvam evaham jatu nasam.
All right, you can hold that up. All right, so text 12. Natu evaham jatunasam natvam neme janadipa nachaiva nabhavishyama sarvivaya mataparam. Never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. Purport. In the Vedas, in the Katha Upanishad, as well as in the Svetasvatara Upanishad, it is said that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the maintainer of innumerable living entities in terms of their different situations according to individual work and reaction of work. That Supreme Personality of Godhead is also, by his plenary portions, alive in the heart of every living entity. Only saintly persons who can see this within and without, the same Supreme Lord, can actually attain to perfect and eternal peace. Nityo nityanam chetanas chetananam eko bahunam yo vidhati kaman tamatmashtam ye nupashyanti dhiras tesham shanti shashvati nateshwaram. Katha Upanishad 2.2.13. The same Vedic truth is given to Arjuna as given to all persons of the world who pose themselves as very learned but factually have a poor fund of knowledge. The Lord says clearly that he himself, Arjuna, and all the kings who are assembled on the battlefield are eternally individual beings, and that the Lord is eternally the maintainer of the living entities, both in their condition and in their liberated situation. Supreme Personality of Godhead is the supreme individual person, and Arjuna, the Lord's eternal associate, and all the kings assembled there are individual eternal persons. It is not that they did not exist as individuals in the past, and it is not that they will not remain eternal persons. Their individuality existed in the past, and their individuality will continue in the future without interruption. Therefore, there is no cause for lamentation for anyone. The Mayavadi theory that after liberation, the individual soul, separated by the covering of Maya or illusion, will merge into the impersonal Brahman and lose its individual existence, is not supported herein by Lord Krishna, the Supreme Authority. Nor is the theory that we only think of individuality in the conditioned state supported herein. Krishna clearly says herein that in the future also the individuality of the Lord and others, as it is confirmed in the Upanishad, will continue eternally. This statement of Krishna is authoritative because Krishna cannot be subject to illusion. If individuality were not a fact, then Krishna would not have stressed it so much, even for the future. The Mayavadi may argue that the individuality spoken of by Krishna is not spiritual but material. Even accepting the argument that the individuality is material, then how can one distinguish Krishna's individuality? Krishna affirms his individuality in the past and confirms his individuality in the future also. He has confirmed his individuality in many ways, and impersonal Brahman has been declared to be subordinate to him. Krishna has maintained spiritual individuality all along if he is accepted as an ordinary conditioned soul in individual consciousness. Then his Bhagavad Gita has no value as authoritative scripture. Let me read that again. Krishna has maintained spiritual individuality all along, and if he is accepted as an ordinary conditioned soul in individual consciousness, then his Bhagavad Gita has no value as an authoritative scripture. A common man with all the forward effects of human frailty is unable to teach that which is worth hearing. The Gita is above such literature. No mundane book compares with the Bhagavad Gita. When one accepts Krishna as an ordinary man, the Gita loses all importance. The Mayavadis argue that the plurality mentioned in this verse is conventional and that it refers to the body. But previous to this verse, such a bodily conception is already condemned. After condemning the bodily conception of the living entities, how is it possible for Krishna to place a conventional proposition on the body again? Therefore, individuality is maintained on spiritual grounds and is thus confirmed by great acharyas like Sri Ramanuja and others. It is clearly mentioned in many places in the Gita that this spiritual individuality is understood by those who are devotees of the Lord, those who are envious of Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, have no bona fide access to the great literature. The non-devotees' approach to the teachings of the Gita is something like that of a bee licking on a bottle of honey. One cannot have a taste of honey unless one opens the bottle. Similarly, the mysticism of the Bhagavad Gita can be understood only by devotees, and no one else can taste it, as it is stated in the fourth chapter of this book. Nor can the Gita be touched by persons who envy the very existence of the Lord. Therefore, the Mayavadi explanation of the Gita is a most misleading presentation of the whole truth. Lord Chaitanya has forbidden us to read commentations made by the Mayavadis and warns that one who takes to such an understanding of the Mayavadi philosophy loses all power to understand the real mystery of the Gita. If individuality refers to the empirical evidence, then there is no need of teaching by the Lord. The plurality of the individual soul and the Lord is an eternal fact, and it is confirmed by the Vedas as above mentioned. Okay, so I'm going to stop here and Varun Prabhu, can you continue from text 13?
Yes, Guru. Text 30. Dehinosmin yatha dehe kaumaram yauvanam jara tatha dehantara praptir dhirastatra mukya. As the embodied soul continuously passes in this body from boyhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body at death. A sober person is not bewildered by such a change or growth. Since every living entity is an individual soul, each is changing his body every moment, manifesting sometimes as a child, sometimes as a youth, and sometimes as an old man. Yet the same spirit soul is there and does not undergo any change. This individual soul finally changes the body at death and transmigrates to another body. And since it is sure to have another body in the next birth, either material or spiritual, there was no cause for lamentation by Arjun on account of death, neither for Bhishma nor for Drona, for whom he was so much concerned. Rather, he should rejoice for their changing bodies from old to new ones, thereby rejuvenating their energy. Such changes of body account for varieties of enjoyment or suffering according to one's work in life. So, Bhishma and Drona, being noble souls, were surely going to have spiritual bodies in the next life, or at least life in heavenly bodies for superior enjoyment of material existence. So, in either case, there was no cause for lamentation. Any man who has perfect knowledge of the constitution of the individual soul, the super soul, and nature, both material and spiritual, is called a dhira, or a most sober man. Such a man is never deluded by the change of bodies. The Mayavadi theory of oneness of the spirit soul cannot be entertained on the ground that the spirit soul cannot be cut into pieces as a fragmental portion. Such cutting into different individual souls would make the supreme cleavable or changeable, against the principle of the supreme souls being unchangeable. As confirmed in the Gita, the fragmental portions of the supreme exist eternally, sanatan, and are called kshara. That is, they have a tendency to fall down into material nature. These fragmental portions are eternally so, and even after liberation, the individual soul remains the same, fragmental. But once liberated, he lives an eternal life in bliss and knowledge with the personality of Godhead. The theory of reflection can be applied to the super soul, who is present in each and every individual body and is known as Paramatma. He is different from the individual living entity. When the sky is reflected in water, the reflections represent both the sun and the moon and the stars also. The stars can be compared to the living entities, and the sun or the moon to the Supreme Lord. The individual fragmental spirit soul is represented by Arjun, and the supreme soul is the personality of Godhead Sri Krishna. They are not on the same level, as it will be apparent in the beginning of fourth chapter. If Arjun is on the same level with Krishna and Krishna is not superior to Arjun, then the relationship of instructor and instructed becomes meaningless. If both of them are deluded by the illusory energy Maya, then there is no need of one being the instructor and the other the instructed. Such instruction would be useless, because in the clutches of Maya no one can be an authoritative instructor. Under the circumstances, it is admitted that Lord Krishna is the Supreme Lord, superior in position to living entity Arjun, who is a forgetful soul deluded by Maya. Text 14. Matra sparshastu kaunteya sitoshna sukha dukhada agama paino nityas tamstitiksha bharata. O son of Kunti, the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress, and their disappearance in due course, are like the appearance and disappearance of winter and summer seasons. They arise from sense perception, O scion of Bharat, and one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. Purport. In the proper discharge of duty, one has to learn to tolerate non-permanent appearances and disappearances of happiness and distress. According to Vedic injunction, one has to take his bath early in the morning, even during the month of Magha, January, February. It is very cold at that time, but in spite of that, a man who abides by the religious principles does not hesitate to take his bath. Similarly, a woman does not hesitate to cook in the kitchen in the months of May and June, the hottest part of the summer season. One has to execute his duty in spite of climatic inconveniences. Similarly, to fight is the religious principle of the Kshatriyas. And although one has to fight with some friend or relative, one should not deviate from his prescribed duty. One has to follow the prescribed rules and regulations of religious principles in order to rise up to the platform of knowledge, because by knowledge and devotion only can one liberate himself from the clutches of Maya, illusion. The two different names of address given to Arjun are also significant. To address him as Kaunteya signifies his great blood relations from his mother's side, and to address him as Bharat signifies his greatness from his father's side. From both sides, he is supposed to have a great heritage. A great heritage brings responsibility in the matter of proper discharge of duties. Therefore, he cannot avoid fighting. Text 15. Yam hi na vyathayanti ete purusham purusharshabha Sama dukkha sukham dhiram somritatya vyaya kalpate. O best among men, Arjun, the person who is not disturbed by happiness and distress and is steady in both is certainly eligible for liberation. Purport: anyone who is steady in his determination for the advanced stage of spiritual realization anyone who is steady in his determination for the advanced stage of spiritual realization and can equally tolerate the onslaughts of distress and happiness is certainly a person eligible for liberation. In the Varnashram institution, the fourth stage of life, namely the renounced order, sannyas, is a painstaking situation. But one who is serious about making his life perfect surely adopts the sannyas order of life in spite of all difficulties. The difficulties usually arise from having to sever family relationships, to give up the connection of wife and children. But if anyone is able to tolerate such difficulties, surely his path to spiritual realization is complete. Similarly, in Arjun's discharge of duties as a Kshatriya, he is advised to persevere, even if it is difficult to fight with his family members or similarly beloved persons. Lord Chaitanya took sannyas at the age of 24, and his dependents, young wife as well as old mother, had no one else to look after them. Yet for a higher cause he took sannyas and was steady in the discharge of higher duties. That is the way of achieving liberation from material bondage. Text 16. Na sato vidyate bhavo, na bhavo vidyate satah. O
Okay,
bha-
Prabhu.
okay.
I'm sorry. Okay. All right. So, Lord Prabhu, you can continue from text 16. Nasate Vidyate Bhava.
Text 16. Na sato vidye bhavo, na bhavo vidyate sata, ubayo api drishto nitas, svanasyo tattva darshivi. Translation. Those who are serious of the truth have concluded that of the non-existence, the material body, there is no endurance, and of the eternal, the soul, there is no change. This they have concluded by studying the nature of both. Purport. There is no endurance of the changing body. That the body is changing every moment by the action and reaction of the different cells is admitted by modern medical science. And thus growth and old age are taking place in the body. But the spirit soul exists permanently, remaining the same despite all changes of the body and the mind. This is the difference between matter and spirit. By nature, the body is ever changing, and the soul is eternal. This conclusion is established by all classes of seers of the truth, both impersonalists and personalists. In the Vishnu Purana 2:12-38, it is stated that Vishnu and his abodes all have self-illuminated spiritual existence. Jyotimshi Vishnu Bhuvanani Vishnu. The words existence and non-existence refer only to spirit and matter. That is the version of all series of truth. This is the beginning of the instructions by the Lord to the living entities who are bewildered by the influence of ignorance. The removal of ignorance involves a re-establishment of the eternal relationship between the worshipper and the worshipable, and the consequent understanding of the difference between the part and parcel, living entities, and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One can understand the nature of the Supreme by thorough study of oneself. The difference between oneself and the Supreme being understood as the relationship between the part and the whole. In the Vedanta Sutra, as well as in the Srimad Bhagavatam, the Supreme has been accepted as the origin of all emanations. Such emanations are experienced by the superior and inferior nature sequence. The living, the living entities belong to the superior nature, as it will be revealed in the 7th chapter. Although there is no difference between the energy and the energetic is accepted as the supreme, and the energy or nature is accepted as the subordinate. The living entities, therefore, are always subordinate to the Supreme Lord, as in the case of the master and the servant, or the teacher and the taught. Such clear knowledge is impossible to understand under the spell of ignorance, and to drive away such ignorance, the Lord teaches the Bhagavad Gita for the enlightenment of all living entities for all time. Text 17. Ave nase tu tad vidi yena sarvam idam tatam vishnasam avayas yas na kashet kartum ariti. Translation. That which pervades the entire body, you should know to be indestructible. No one is able to destroy that imperishable soul. Purport. This verse was clearly explained. This verse more clearly explains the real nature of the soul, which is spread all over the body. Anyone can understand what is spread all over the body. It is consciousness. Everyone is conscious of the pains and pleasures of the body, in part or as a whole. This spreading of consciousness is limited within one's body. The pains and pleasures of one body are unknown to another. Therefore, each and every body is the embodiment of all individual soul, and the symptom of the soul's presence is perceived as individual consciousness. This soul is described as 1/10,000th part of the upper portion of the hair point in size. In the Svetavatrana Upanishad 5.9 confirms this. Balagrasasa Bhagasya Satada Kalpitasya Cha Bhavo Jivasa Vineya Sachanantyaya Kalpate. When the upper point of the hair is divided into 1/100th part, and again each such part is further divided into 1/100th part, each such part is a measurement of the dimension of the spirit soul. Similarly, the same version is stated. Keshagrat Sata Bhagasya Satam Sajrista Maka Deva Shuksmam Swarupayam Shakyayatito Chitkana. There are innumerable particles of spiritual atoms, which are measured as 1/10,000th of the upper portion of the hair. Therefore, the individual particle of spirit soul is a spiritual atom smaller than that material atom, and such atoms are innumerable. This very small spiritual spark is the basic principle of the material body, and the influence of such a spiritual spark is spread all over the body as the influence of the active principle of some medicine spreads throughout the body. This current of the spirit soul is felt all of the body as consciousness, and that is a proof of the presence of the soul. Any layman can understand that the material body, minus consciousness, is a dead body, and this consciousness cannot be revived in the body by any means of material administration. Therefore, consciousness is not due to any amount of material combination, but to the spirit soul. In the Mundaka Upanishad 3.1.9, the measurements of the atomic spirit soul is further explained. Ishurno Atma Chetasa Viditwavyo Yasmin.
Hold that, Prabhu. Okay, let's see here. Alright, so continuing in that purport. Esho Nur Atma Chetasa Viditavyo Yasmin Prana Panchada Samvivesha Kanai Chitam Sarvamotam Prajanam Yasmin Vishuddhe Vibhavati Esha Atma. The soul is atomic in size and can be perceived by perfect intelligence. This atomic soul is floating in the five kinds of air: prana, apana, vyana, samana, and udana. Is situated within the heart and spreads its influence all over the body of the embodied living entities. When the soul is purified from the contamination of the five kinds of material air, its spiritual influence is exhibited. The Hatha Yoga principle is meant for controlling the five kinds of air encircling the pure soul by different kinds of sitting postures. Not for any material profit, but for liberation of the minute soul from the entanglement of the material atmosphere. So the constitution of the atomic soul is admitted in all Vedic literatures, and it is also actually felt in the practical experience of any sane man. Only an insane man can think of this atomic soul as an all-pervading Vishnu Tattva. The influence of the atomic soul can be spread over a particular body. According to the Mundaka Upanishad, this atomic soul is situated in the heart of every living entity, and because the measurement of the atomic soul is beyond the power of appreciation of the material scientists, some of them assert foolishly that there is no soul. The individual atomic soul is definitely there in the heart along with the supersoul, and thus all the energies of the bodily movement are emanating from this part of the body. The corpuscles which carry the oxygen from the lungs gather energy from the soul. When the soul passes away from this position, the activity of the blood generating fusion ceases. Medical science accepts the importance of the red corpuscles, but it cannot ascertain that the source of the energy is the soul. Medical science does not admit that the heart is the seat of all energies of the body. Such atomic particles of the spirit soul are compared to the sunshine molecules. In the sunshine, there are innumerable radiant molecules. Similarly, the fragmental parts of the Supreme are atomic sparks of the rays of the Supreme Lord, called by the name Prabha or superior energy. So, whether one follows Vedic knowledge or modern science, one cannot deny the existence of the soul within the body. And the science of the soul is explicitly described in the Bhagavad Gita by the personality of Godhead himself. In text 18, Antavanta ime deha nitya yukta saririna anasino prameyasya Tasmad Yudasyasva Bharata. The material body of the indestructible, immeasurable, and eternal living entity is sure to come to an end. Therefore, fight, O descendant of Bharat. Purport. The material body is perishable by nature. It may perish immediately, or it may do so after 100 years. It is a question of time only. There is no chance of maintaining it indefinitely, but the spirit soul is so minute that it cannot even be seen by an enemy, to say nothing of being killed. As mentioned in the previous verse, it is so small that no one can have any idea how to measure its dimension. So, from both viewpoints, there is no cause of lamentation, because the living entity, as he is, cannot be killed, nor can the material body be saved for any length of time or permanently protected. The minute particle of the whole spirit acquires this material body according to his work, and therefore observance of religious principles should be utilized. In the Vedanta Sutra, the living entity is qualified as light because he is part and parcel of the Supreme Light. As sunlight maintains the entire universe, so the light of the soul maintains this material body. As soon as the spirit soul is out of this material body, the body begins to decompose, and therefore it is the spirit soul which maintains this body. The body itself is unimportant. Arjuna was advised to fight and not sacrifice the cause of religion for material bodily considerations. All right, Varun, you can read a little bit here from text 19.
Text 19. Ya enam veti hantaram yashchainam manyate hatam ubhau tau na vijjanito ayam hanti na hanyate. Neither he who thinks the living entity the slayer, nor he who thinks it slain is in knowledge. For the self slays not, nor is slain. Purport. When an embodied living entity is hurt by fatal weapons, it is to be known that the living entity within the body is not killed. The spirit soul is so small that it is impossible to kill him by any material weapon, as will be evident from the subsequent verses. Nor is the living entity killable because of his spiritual constitution. What is killed or is supposed to be killed is the body only. This, however, does not at all encourage killing of the body. The Vedic injunction is Mahimsyayat Sarva Bhutani, never commit violence to anyone. Nor does understanding that the living entity is not killed encourage animal slaughter. Killing of the body of anyone without authority is abominable and is punishable by the law of the state as well as by the law of the Lord. Arjun, however, is being engaged in killing for the principle of religion and not whimsically. Text 20. Na jayate mriyate va kadachin ayam bhutva bhavita va na bhuya jo nityah shashvato yam purano na hanyate hanyamane sharire. For the soul, there is neither birth nor death at any time. He has not come into being, does not come into being, and will not come into being. He is unborn, eternal, ever existing, and primeval. He is not slain when the body is slain or poor. Qualitatively, the small atomic fragmental part of the Supreme Spirit is one with the Supreme. He undergoes no changes like the body. Sometimes the soul is called the steady or utastha. The body is subject to six kinds of transformation. It takes its birth from the womb of the mother's body, remains for some time, grows, produces some effects, gradually dwindles, and at last vanishes into oblivion. The soul, however, does not go through such changes. The soul is not born, but because he takes on a material body, the body takes its birth. The soul does not take birth there, and the soul does not die. Anything which has birth also has death. And because the soul has no birth, he therefore has no past, present, or future. He is eternal, ever existing, and primeval. That is, there is no trace in history of his coming into being. Under the impression of the body, we seek the history of birth, etc., of the soul. The soul does not at any time becomes old, as the body does. The so-called old man, therefore, feels himself to be in the same spirit as in his childhood or youth. The changes of the body do not affect the soul. The soul does not deteriorate like the tree, nor anything material. The soul has no byproduct either. The byproducts of the body, namely children, are also different individual souls, and owing to the body, they appear as children of a particular man. The body develops because of the soul's presence, but the soul has neither offshoots nor chains. Therefore, the soul is free from the six phases of the body. In the Katha Upanishad,
You can
one
hold. Mhm. All right, Lord Prabhu, you can finish us up tonight. Maybe you're not hearing us. I think you're muted. All right, so maybe he's not hearing us. In the Katha Upanishad, 1 to 18, we find a similar passage which reads, Na jayate mriyate va vipaschin, nayam kutaschinna babhuva kaschit, ajo nitya sasvatom yam purano, nahanyate hanyamane sharire. The meaning and purport of this verse is the same as in Bhagavad Gita. But here in this verse, there is one special word, vipaschit, which means learned or with knowledge. The soul is full of knowledge, or full always with consciousness. Therefore, consciousness is a symptom of the soul. Even if one does not find the soul within the heart, where he is situated, one can still understand the presence of the soul simply by the presence of consciousness. Sometimes we do not find the sun in the sky owing to the clouds, or for some other reason, but the light of the sun is always there, and we are convinced that it is there for daytime. As soon as there is a little light in the sky early in the morning, we can understand that the sun is in the sky. Similarly, since there is some consciousness in all bodies, whether man or animal, we can understand the presence of the soul. The consciousness of the soul, however, is different from the consciousness of the Supreme, because the Supreme Consciousness is all knowledge, past, present, and future. The consciousness of the individual soul is prone to be forgetful. When he is forgetful of his real nature, he obtains education and enlightenment from the superior lessons of Krishna. But Krishna is not like the forgetful soul. If so, Krishna's teaching the Bhagavad Gita would be useless. There are two kinds of souls, namely the minute particle, Anu Atma, and the super soul, Vibhu Atma. This is confirmed in Katha Upanishad 1-20 in this way. Ano Raniyan Mahato Mahiyan Atmasya Jantor Nihito Guhayam Tam Makratu Pashyati Vitasoko Dhatu Prasadan Mahimanam Atmana. Both the super soul Paramatma and the atomic soul Jivatma are situated on the same tree of the body within the same heart of the living being. And only one who has become free from all material desires as well as lamentations by the grace of the Supreme understand the glories of the soul. Krishna is therefore the fountainhead of the super soul also. Others will be disclosed in the following chapters. And Arjuna is the atomic soul, forgetful of his real nature. Therefore, he requires to be enlightened by Krishna or his bona fide representative, the spiritual master. Alright, so we can actually stop here tonight at text 20. And we can continue on the following reading from 21. So, basically, Arjuna started asking Krishna, the Supreme Spiritual Master, to make a solution to the problem he's experiencing. Because he's lamenting, he says he doesn't know what to do, and he's asking Krishna for advice. So here it says he offers himself as a disciple. He wants to stop friendly talks. Talks between the master and the disciple are serious, and now Arjuna wants to talk very seriously before the recognized spiritual master. Krishna is therefore the original spiritual master of the science of Bhagavad Gita, and Arjuna is the first disciple for understanding the Gita. So, if we want to curb lamentation for good, we have to take shelter of Krishna, as Arjuna is seeking to do. So Arjuna asks Krishna to solve this problem definitely, and that is the way of Krishna consciousness. Arjuna had previously argued that religious principles should be given more importance than politics or sociology, which is why he did not want to fight. But he did not know that knowledge of matter, soul, and the Supreme is even more important than religious formularies. And because he was lacking in that knowledge, he should not oppose himself as a very learned man. As he did not happen to be a very learned man, he was consequently lamenting for something which was unworthy of lamentation. And that's that famous verse, Asocham and Vasocham Stvam, Pragyavadam Shabasase, Gatasuna Gatasuna Sha, Nanu Sochanti Panditaha. It says, while speaking learned words, you are mourning for what is not worthy of grief. The truly wise, they lament neither for the living nor for the dead. So he's pointing out to Arjuna that his situation of difficulty was because of a misunderstanding. Then he goes on later on to say, never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. So then later on, as the embodied soul continues passing in its body from boyhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body at death. And a sober person is not bewildered by such a change. Many people are bewildered by that change, but a sober person is not. He also said that, O son of Kunti, the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress, and their disappearance in due course, are like the appearance and disappearance of winter and summer seasons. He says they arrive from sense perception, O Skayana Bharata, and one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. Then he gives more information on the soul, right? He also says, in the purport, Prabhupada says, as soon as the spirit soul is out of this material body, the body begins to decompose. Therefore, it is the spirit soul which maintains the body. The body itself is unimportant. So, we're learning about the nature of the soul. And chapter 2 is the Bhagavad Gita is called Contents of the Gita Summarized. There are more subject matters to be explained, but the first thing is Krishna addresses the spirit soul, the eternality of the spirit soul, and the duty of the spirit soul. So, any questions or comments or realizations on the subject matter? Alright, so if there's nothing, we can actually stop here tonight. And Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Srila Bhagavatam Ki Jai, Gara Premanandi, Hari Hari Bol.